between us.
Well, the 50% sort of watermark would have been plenty, because that couldn't prevent every single takeover that would ever come for us if that had ever got. And I can't remember who it was, but I know that there was someone of the time urged United fans in the wake of the failed takeover to buy up everything, and obviously nobody listened.
Yeah, I mean, we were all urging that, and some of us did, and some of us contributed to a fund, and Must now has got some money in a fund, but nothing like enough to buy United, or even a few players' wages for a few weeks. But it's never going to happen. It was always pie in the sky, and I think there was some internal tension within the group between us as to the idealists who thought that was if we could have done that, great. Although, having said that, to have a club with 28,000 or 100,000 owners is potentially a bit unmanageable, and we would have had to work out a way of actually running things. And you can't have a vote of all your shareholders every time you buy a new player or sell a player, or decide the team lineup.
Real Madrid seems to do quite well with their sort of ownership model, which is fan owned, even though they don't act like it at times. Bayern Munich's is 50% fan owned, although the other half is owned by, I think it's Audi.
Well, it's Barcelona that are more fan owned than Real Madrid. I mean, Real Madrid are untypical because they've got the backing really of the Spanish state, and no club in Britain's got that. No. But
different states.
Yeah, but it can be tricky, and it has been. It isn't always a model that works successfully. But by golly, I wish we'd had something like that instead of the Glazers. And I think that what happened with the Sky bid is that it opened people's eyes to the potential of buying big football clubs. And at first, the people who started buying us up were the so-called Coolmore Mafia, John Magner and J.P. McManus, both famous for their owning racehorses. And they became great mates with Ferguson. And Ferguson, around the same time, started owning some racehorses himself, and he owned some of them with the Coolmore boys. And it looked like they were buying, Magner and McManus were buying up shares in United, and with the intention that they would make Ferguson give him some big role in the club. I mean, once he'd retired as manager, perhaps chairman of the club. And then there was a big bust-up over a very successful horse called Rock of Gibraltar that won a whole load. I know nothing about horse racing. Well, a lot of people say I know nothing about football as well. But they run goodness knows how many races in a row, and
record breaking.
And of course, suddenly the stud rights to Rock of Gibraltar were huge, and Ferguson thought that because they were co-owners, he would be getting half the stud rights. And the Coolmore guy said, no. You just get half the prize money from winning the races. When it comes to the stud rights, that's all ours. So Ferguson sued them, and it got very nasty. And in the end, the Coolmore guys got fed up. They sold their shares to the Glazers, and it didn't take much more for the Glazers to win ownership of the club. And if Ferguson and the Coolmore guys hadn't had that row over Rock of Gibraltar, and if Ferguson hadn't pushed his luck really by suing them, because remember it was him that sued them, not the other way around, then the Glazers would not be there today. Now, goodness knows who would then be owning it instead. But it's difficult to conceive of many worse owners than the Glazers in the recent history of English football. Well, certainly at the leading level.
Has anyone ever got the Coolmore lads on record?
They never say anything about this sort of thing. No.
So there's been interesting conversations. Yeah, what their plans were.
Yeah, it's like the Glazers, they never talk either. No. I mean, they prefer to operate behind the scenes. But it was very interesting, because I was actually approached at one point because I wrote a book about Ferguson. And although I'm a United fan, my book is warts and all, because ultimately I'm a journalist first and a United fan second. And so the book's warts and all, and they and there's a lot of things in there that Ferguson didn't like. Well, I imagine he didn't like. And I was approached about helping the Coolmore guys, because they were assembling stuff about Ferguson. And it's part of their battle, unfavourable stuff, every aspect of his life you can think of, and they put huge efforts into it. And it looks like they employed Kroll, the famous city investigative company that is often used in takeovers and things to investigate other companies and other individuals. And indeed, we discovered, because we used to go as part of Sheffield United, later on Must, while there were still shares in the club, before it was taken over by the Glazers, we used to go to the annual general meeting and ask awkward questions and sit in different parts of the audience so as we didn't all look like one big block. And they would have just ignored us as a block. Whereas if you're spread out in a place.
Yeah.
And suddenly we went to an AGM, and there are all these people getting up and asking these questions, all about Ferguson. We thought that's a straight. Well, we thought it's our job to ask awkward questions, not who are these people? And then, but all the questions were directed, not at, Ferguson wasn't there, but they were about him. We thought, what? Who is that? And then they let one of the people that they sent along clearly left a piece of paper on a chair with all the questions. And so, and we'd secretly done a recording of the meeting. So I was able to go through the recording, and they'd given their real names, and I worked out who some of them were, and I linked up one of them with Kroll. And I did a piece about it all in the Mirror. But it was just showed the, how nasty things got at that stage between Coolmore and Ferguson, how fraught it all was. And looking back, if you'd given me a choice between Sky taking over and the Sky taking over and the Glazers taking over, I would have chosen Sky. In fact, I wish we'd lost that campaign, simply because if Sky had taken over, I think they would not have taken money out of United to the extent that the Glazers have, and they would not have neglected United to the extent that the Glazers have. I mean, the real problem that you've had at United for the last, it's getting on for 20 years now, is that I hear it's impossible to get decisions out of the Glazers. Are we going to buy this player? Well, come on, we need a decision. And by the time they get back, the player's gone somewhere else. Yeah. And the neglect of the ground and the huge hundreds of millions that have been taken out of the club, which could have gone on improving the team, improving the ground.
1.6 billion out the door, and we still owe what we owed the day they took over, plus about 300 million transfers since.
And like you say about the stadium, if we're gonna revamp it, it's going to cost almost £1 billion, let alone if we rebuild it.
Yeah.
So it is a bit of a nightmare. When the Glazers were first suggested, then did you still have that sort of expectation that we can push back? We've just done it with Rupert Murdoch and Sky B. We can do this again, or was it because of the complexities with what was going on with Ferguson and the owners? Was it just far more difficult?
By then I'd taken a back seat in Must because it was taking up too much of my life, and I had to get on with earning a living and doing my ordinary job. And there are other people who'd emerged who were able to carry on the work. But there was a campaign against the Glazers takeover. The problem was that at the time we were all saying, well, who are these people? They've got no obvious connection with United. They've got no obvious interest in football. At least Sky had an interest in football. Yeah. And that's why the fear, and also we'd heard stories about the way they'd run their sports teams in America. But that campaign it ultimately failed because there wasn't the reason why the Sky campaign, our campaign, failed on Glazers. In the way that the Sky campaign succeeded, and it wasn't just, by the way, I must stress, it wasn't just Sheffield United against Murdoch. IMUSA, the Independent Supporters Association, played a huge role, probably a bigger role actually, than we did in blocking the Sky campaign. But the reason why was because there was a significant competition, a legal argument. It's quite very complicated competition law, but thankfully it was there, and there wasn't a decent competition argument in the case of the Glazers, so that's why it sailed through.
It's mad how they've been allowed, it's insane to me how you can buy a business and then lump the debt that you used to buy the business on the business, make the business pay for the debt that you got to buy the business. How it feels like it's a robbery on a technicality.